Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Meanwhile, Jack was just about to step into the Damaris residence when he bumped into his parents. Dad, Mom, what are you doing here? Ever since he had proven his capabilities in taking over the family business, both Titus and Priscilla started to travel to other places to do their medical consultations. For some unknown reason, they came home without informing him. Priscilla frowned and shot a reproachful look at her son before asking, "I heard that you are involved with Lucian's ex-wife?" His parents must have seen the overwhelming discussions on the internet which took place a while ago. As a result, they did an investigation on Roxanne and found out that she had 2 children. What was more surprising to them was the fact that Roxanne was Lucian's ex-wife. The thought of her son socializing with a divorcee with children irked Priscilla. Jack looked at his mother in puzzlement. How did you find out?" Since Jack did not deny it, then it must be true. Priscilla was displeased. The online comments went wild a while ago. All of our relatives are asking us about it. Jack became even more confused after hearing that. They know that Roxanne is Lucian's. Before he could finish his sentence, his mother cut him off. We did our own investigation. Do you want others to know that you are seeing a divorcee?" Priscilla found it difficult to suppress her anger when she saw her son's reaction. "I'm the one who brought you up, and I have never interfered in your private life. You can date any woman you want to." She stared furiously at Jack before continuing, "But why can't you find someone else? Must you date a divorcee with 2 children? On top of that, her ex-husband is that guy from the Farwell family. You'll be made a laughingstock once people find out about this." After listening to his mother's lecture, Jack showed no remorse. Instead, a grin appeared on his face. His unrepentant response annoyed Priscilla even more, and she glared at Titus Damaris. Sensing his wife's stare, Titus felt helpless. However, under the pressure of his wife, he had no choice but to say something. "Your mom is right. There are so many women out there. Why must you find someone who is in the same social circle as us?" Both the Farwell family and the Damaris family were prominent families in Horrington. How are we going to socialize with them if our son really ends up with Lucian's ex-wife? Titus thought he was stern enough in his reprimand. Unfortunately, he fell short of his wife's expectations. He turned around to find that the grin on Jack's face was even more apparent than before. Titus frowned. Why are you smiling? This is a serious matter." It was only then Jack walked up to his parents and sat down on a single-seater couch. It was obvious that he had something to say. Priscilla exchanged glances with Titus before the two of them turned their attention to their son. Jack then started to explain slowly, "You've got the wrong idea." When his parents heard that, they looked perplexed. "The comments on the internet are going crazy. How can we be mistaken? Have those netizens gotten it wrong too? So, are those photos fake?" Priscilla could not help but question him. Jack shook his head before replying, "Of course not. But it isn't what they think." Titus and Priscilla still eyed their son with suspicion. They had watched Jack grow up. In all those years, they had never once seen their son behaving so intimately with a woman. At a single glance, Jack saw right through his parents. Exasperation inexorably swamped him. "Since you've investigated Ms. Jarvis, I'm sure you already know that she's an exceedingly outstanding doctor." With regard to that statement, Titus and Priscilla had no rebuttal. During the investigation, they had already learned that Roxanne studied under Harvey and was even his top student. That alone was sufficient for them to acknowledge her medical attainments. However, that didn't mean they could accept the fact that she was a divorcee with kids. Jack could tell that his parents were still influenced by public opinion, so he had no choice but to continue explaining things to them helplessly. "I reckon you're both aware of the project the Damaris family established recently." In response, Titus and Priscilla nodded noncommittally. Despite being away from the Damaris residence most of the time, they still kept themselves informed about the Damaris family's activities. At that, Jack nodded in satisfaction. Since you know of this project, you must know that Miss Jarvis is also one of the members involved. Everything was fine before he mentioned that, but the instant he did so, Priscilla's face darkened once more. I heard she also obtained the opportunity by selling her body. Before she could vocalize the rest of that comment, Jack interrupted testily, that's just a baseless rumor. Hadn't Jessica apologized? When Priscilla heard that, her expression turned even grimmer. Jessica had been her ideal candidate for a daughter-in-law throughout the years, but she had never imagined that the woman would do such a thing. In consideration that it was her misjudgment, she didn't say anything further. Subsequently, Jack continued, although I'm taking the lead in this project, Grandpa was the one who chose the collaboration partners. He selected Ms. Jarvis because she showed outstanding performance in the medical consultation. He even personally discussed the collaboration with her. Surprise flashed across Titus and Priscilla's eyes when they learned that she passed Hector's selection. In other words, he's also aware of Jack's interaction with her? If so, why didn't he put a stop to it? When Jack saw that his parents were still misconstruing things, a headache assailed him. His parents had been immersed in improving their medical skills all these years. Consequently, they were seemingly dense when it came to other matters. More accurately speaking, they couldn't be bothered to give much thought to anything else. That also made it extraordinarily taxing for him to clarify things to them. While the Damaris family is a century-old prestigious family in the medical field, its strength is still lacking when it comes to certain aspects even now. As the heir of the Damaris family, dating is definitely not my priority at present, so you can both rest easy, Jack assured patiently. Speaking of the current situation of the Damaris family, Titus and Priscilla were finally willing to put their thinking caps on. Judging from his usual temperament, he indeed couldn't have possibly been so hasty to date that woman. But if it's not love, why must he maintain such close ties with her? Larry is also a good choice for a collaboration partner. Priscilla had always been a straightforward person, so she demanded right then and there, in that case, what exactly are you planning? A meaningful smile bloomed on Jack's face. You'll naturally know when the time comes. That reply of his had both Titus and Priscilla bewildered. Alas, Jack didn't give them any opportunity to ask about it further. All right, I'm going upstairs to report the results of today's medical consultation to Grandpa. Go and rest since you've both just come back. After saying that, he got up from the couch. Before going upstairs, he didn't forget to urge, don't listen to all those gossips out there regarding the matter between me and Miss Jarvis. There was nothing Titus and Priscilla could do about it, so they had no choice but to nod in acquiescence. Meanwhile, at the Research Institute, Caden rambled incessantly about Lucian's merits while helping to transport the medicinal herbs. Regretfully, Roxanne remained unmoved. At the end of his rope, Caden took his leave after transporting the medicinal herbs and left. On his way back to Farwell Group, resentment brewed within him. Even when he went into the CEO's office to report back to Lucian, his face was as black as thunder. What's with this expression of yours? Glimpsing his assistant's expression, Lucian frowned, thinking that Roxanne turned down his help. Only then did Caden snap back to his senses. He chuckled guiltily. Nothing. Seeing that he didn't want to speak of it, Lucian didn't press him for an answer, merely inquiring, have you sent the medicinal herbs over? Caden suppressed the grievance within him and replied succinctly, yes. Miss Jarvis received it personally. He initially thought that his employer would have questions since he mentioned Roxanne. Unexpectedly, Lucian acted as though he didn't hear it, nodding expressionlessly. I got it. You're dismissed. That's all? Caden was stunned for a long while, finding it incredulous. When Lucian remained silent, he sheepishly spun on his heel to leave. While he walked out of the office, He wavered about telling the man about Roxanne and Jack riding in the same car. But upon imagining Lucian's expression after learning about it, he couldn't help shuddering. Hence, he silently nixed that idea. Even when it was time to get off work in the evening, Lucian never mentioned Roxanne anymore. It was as though that batch of medicinal herbs was meant to signify an end to their relationship. Sitting in the adjacent assistant's office, Caden watched as Lucian walked out of his office with a face devoid of expression and took the elevator directly when it was time to get off work. A mixture of emotions roiled within him. Is Mr. Farwell really giving up on Ms. Jarvis? Needless to say, Lucian knew nothing about Caden's thoughts. Nonetheless, his feelings somewhat aligned with the latter's conjectures. Ever since he fell ill until that present day, Roxanne's reaction had disappointed him beyond words. He felt that he had already sacrificed enough and lowered himself sufficiently to make up for his mistakes 6 years ago. Yet, she remained unmoved. Therefore, he felt that he needed to stop for a while and carefully assess what was lacking between them. He mulled it over throughout the drive. Soon, his car slowly came to a stop at the gates of the kindergarten. Archie, Benny, and Estella hadn't been let out of school yet. For once, he waited for them at the gates. Sometime later, the children walked out in a line under Pippa's lead. They seemingly caught sight of his tall figure at once. Daddy. It was the first time Estella saw her father that early, so she should be thrilled. However, she appeared listless. It's been a long time since I've seen Miss Jarvis. I heard from Archie and Benny that they've also tried persuading her, but she refuses to meet me. I wonder what had happened between Daddy and her now. Little did she know that the subsequent events would be even worse than she had imagined. When the children had walked over to him, Lucian held his hand out to Estella. Let's go home. Hearing that, Estella snapped her eyes up and gaped at her father in surprise. But Miss Lane isn't here yet. In the past, they had always waited with Archie and Benny. Only when the boys had left would Estella do the same. At the side, Archie and Benny were also perplexed, not quite understanding Lucian's meaning. Previously, Daddy left with Essie right away because he was sick. But now, he has obviously recovered. Lucian cast a look at Archie and Benny indifferently. A strange feeling inexplicably welled up within Archie and Benny when they met his gaze. The look in Daddy's eyes when he regards us seems to have changed. In fact, they felt that the man seemingly didn't want to look at them for long, his gaze only staying on them for a brief moment before leaving in the next heartbeat. Mr. Farwell? Benny couldn't help venturing. Lucian merely inclined his head a fraction. Ms. Ward will wait with you both. Having said that, he held his hand out at Estella once more. Estella was reluctant to leave, but she could tell that her father appeared to be angry. After a moment's hesitation, she ultimately reached out and took his hand. Archie and Benny, on the other hand, could only quieten down and watch helplessly as Lucian left with Estella. Is Daddy mad at Mommy, Archie? Benny stared at his brother pitifully. Archie remained expressionless, but disappointment glinted in his eyes. That was also the only possibility he could think of. After all, Lucian kept Roxanne company by her side every time she was sick. But this time, he was sick, yet she didn't even bother inquiring about his condition. Daddy must be pretty disappointed. Meanwhile, Lucian brought Estella into the car. His gaze swept over Archie and Benny at the gates of the kindergarten. Then, he slowly started the car. When they had driven out a distance away, Estella couldn't resist asking, "Are you mad at Miss Jarvis, Daddy?" Lucian's brows creased, and he didn't answer that. He could guess what she wanted to say, but he wasn't in the mood to listen right then. Unaware of her father's thoughts, Estella continued in a cute voice, "As she didn't mean to keep away instead of visiting you. It must have been because she was busy with work." She was sad about the fact that she hadn't seen Roxanne in a long time, but still, she chose to comfort him. "Miss Jarvis is already avoiding us. If Daddy is mad at her on top of that, I don't know when they'll make up. At the end of the day, she was still yearning for Roxanne to be her mother. Lucian wasn't at all surprised to hear that. If it were in the past, he would have played along with her and consoled her. This time, however, he merely frowned. His voice was also a touch chilly. I will talk about this another day. Such an attitude made it clear that he was planning to evade the matter. Estella's cheeks puffed up. Despite her reluctance, she still zipped her mouth obediently. As she glowered at his back, she mused inwardly. Daddy must be mad at Miss Jarvis, or even livid. What must I do to have them make up? She was rather troubled by the situation. Before she could figure out a solution, the car had already come to a slow stop before the Farwell residence. Lucian alighted from the car before turning back and carrying Estella out. Just when the two of them were about to head into the mansion, the door was opened from the inside, upon which Aubrey walked out. At the sight of her, Lucian's expression changed slightly. Estella was likewise shocked, and her face scrunched up. Don't tell me, Daddy is suddenly mad at Miss Jarvis because of this evil woman. Lucian, Essie, you're back. As though blinded to their change in expression, Aubrey went up to them with a bright smile. Behind her followed Catalina, who wore an exasperated expression. Aubrey came to visit out of the blue that afternoon, claiming that she wanted to check on Lucian's recovery. It went without saying that she had no authority to kick the woman out, so she could only allow her to stay. Lucian merely tilted his head at Aubrey apathetically before bringing Estella into the mansion. Behind them, as Aubrey eyeballed their backs, a flash of something flittered across her eyes. From what I know, Roxanne and Lucian hadn't met ever since that night. It's evident that the batch knew her place and gave up. With that being the case, I've got to seize this opportunity all the more and secure my position as the future mistress of the Farwell family. Although Lucian remained indifferent to her as usual, she wasn't deterred in the least. Upon seeing that they had gone into the mansion, she hurriedly followed suit. Is something the matter? Lucian had already seen Estella back to her room and was descending the stairs. He pinned a detached look on the woman at the door. Halting in her steps, Aubrey answered smilingly, Mrs. Farwell told me to come and see how you're doing. By then, Lucian had already retracted his gaze on her. I've already recovered, so tell her not to worry. Aubrey wanted to speak further, but he had promptly dismissed her, adding, if there's nothing else, you may leave. At that, Aubrey abruptly froze. But how could I possibly leave when I haven't even got the time to do anything? Lucian swept his gaze over her. Wasn't it my mother who asked you to come and look in on me? You've seen me now, so it's best that you go over quickly and tell her how I'm doing so that she won't worry. After saying that, he withdrew his gaze, unwilling to lay eyes on her any longer than necessary. His insouciance had Aubrey gritting her teeth hard. Even so, I must think of a way to draw close to him. With that in mind, she cast a glance at the stairs at the door. A second later, she retracted her gaze and flashed the man a smile. You're right. I'll leave you to it, then. Please excuse me. In response, Lucian nodded noncommittally. Pursing her lips, Aubrey smiled before whirling around and walking toward the door. Unexpectedly, her foot slipped just as she reached the stairs. A shriek echoed in the mansion. Startled, Catalina hastily ran out to see what had happened. She was greeted by the sight of Aubrey sitting on the ground pathetically, curled into a ball while cradling her ankle with both hands and hissing her breaths perpetually. From the looks of it, she was in agonizing pain. What's wrong, Miss Pearson? Seeing that, Catalina swiftly rushed over to help her up. Alas, Aubrey kept her head lowered with her eyes trained on her ankle. Her forehead was dotted with sweat. Panicking slightly, Catalina jerked her head up and cried out for Lucian. Mr. Farwell, quick, come and have a look. No sooner had her voice rang out than Lucian's figure appeared at the door of the mansion. He stared down at the woman on the ground. So what happened? It wasn't until Aubrey heard his voice that she lifted her head with a painful expression on her face and forced a smile. It's nothing. I just... While saying that, she forcibly tried to get up from the ground. But the moment her injured leg touched the ground, a stab of excruciating pain shot through her body. Unstable on her feet, she almost fell back onto the ground. Catalina failed to react in time. Just when Aubrey was going to take a spill, a hand materialized all of a sudden. It was Lucian. You don't force yourself when you're hurt. Frowning, Lucian aloofly supported her elbow with a hand and helped her regain her feet. Despite helping her, his tone remained impassive without a hint of concern. When she was steady on her feet, he dropped his hand and ordered Catalina, "Help Miss Pearson in." Sorry, I was thinking about something earlier, so I accidentally missed the step," Aubrey murmured in feigned contrition after Catalina had helped her onto the couch. Standing behind the two of them, Lucian said nothing to that. Aubrey's heart sank, and she hypocritically remarked, "I probably twisted my ankle by accident. Let me rest for a while before going over to Mrs. Farwell's place to tell her about your condition." Having said that, she acted as though she was afraid that he would worry and flashed him another smile. She initially thought that her comment would garner the man's sympathy. At the very least, he would allow her to stay over that night. To her disappointment, Lucian merely bobbed his head blithely. Subsequently, he crouched before her. For a moment, she was at a loss. A heartbeat later, a sharp pain came from her ankle, upon which her expression instantly changed. "Does it hurt?" Lucian queried in a deep voice, a hand grasping her injured ankle. Gritting her teeth, Aubrey nodded fervently. In the next instant, Lucian dropped his hand off her. "It's likely a fracture." When Aubrey heard that, her eyes lit up, and she ventured, "Is it that serious? Then, can I—" Before she could finish her utterance with her request to stay the night at the manor, Lucian cut her off. "Have Dr. Ellswick make a trip here and check her over," Lucian instructed Catalina, shifting his gaze away from her. Humming in acknowledgement, Catalina immediately contacted the family doctor. Aubrey wanted to make another try, but Lucian's voice sounded once more. "If it's severe, you might have to go to the hospital. Stay still and sit here to wait for Dr. Ellswick to come and check on your injury." On the whole, those words could be considered an expression of concern. However, Aubrey knew all too well that he was merely fulfilling his obligations as the host. Otherwise, his tone wouldn't be so icy. If I hadn't taken a tumble at his doorstep, he probably wouldn't even have bothered to inquire about my condition. At that realization, she couldn't help recalling how the man kept Roxanne company for the entire night when the latter fell sick. With the comparison between the two, a tidal wave of resentment surged within her. The expression on her face grew considerably grimmer. Lucian, on the other hand, had already sat down on the couch next to her. Right then, he was checking his emails on his phone. It was abundantly clear that he planned on having the family doctor deal with her injury. His impassioned look had the envy within Aubrey blazing all the hotter. Yet, she was also aware that it wasn't a good time for her to speak. Almost half an hour passed before Sonny finally arrived. What's the matter, Catalina? Who did you say was injured on the phone just now?" Hastening over, Catalina pointed at Aubrey on the couch. "Miss Pearson tripped and fell at the stairs. Go and check on her, quick." Sonny had been the family doctor of the Farwell family for many years, so he was naturally acquainted with Aubrey. Hearing that she was injured, he quickly stepped forward with his medical kit to check her over. Soon, Aubrey's painful groans filled the air. Withdrawing his hand, Sonny concluded solemnly, "I'm afraid it's a hairline fracture. I can't treat this." At that diagnosis, a glimmer of surprise flittered across Aubrey's eyes. "Oh no, a hairline fracture. I merely wanted to put on a show to stay the night at the Farwell residence. Never had I thought that I'd sustain such a severe injury. But on second thought, I've already fractured my arm previously." As long as I obtain the results I want, even a fracture is worth it. At that thought, she lifted her eyes and looked at Lucian with hope. It might be best that I remain immobile, considering my injury. Can I intrude on you for tonight and stay here at the manor? In the meantime, Estella was getting angry from waiting, so she let herself out the door. As soon as she arrived downstairs, she heard Aubrey express her intention to spend the night. Alarm bells sounded in Estella's head. She waddled over to her father's side. Daddy and Miss Jarvis had not reconciled, and she would be even angrier if she finds out that Miss Pearson is going to spend the night here. Even worse, Estella feared her father would have Aubrey become her mother. The child gazed at her father with wide, unblinking eyes and conveyed her thoughts without uttering a word. Lucian met Estella's eyes and caressed her head comfortingly, then turned his gaze to Aubrey. Aubrey's heart thumped audibly at the realization that Lucian's answer was not what she wanted to hear. You should go to a hospital for that. I wouldn't be able to explain myself to my mother if your condition worsens. Lucian's tone was cold. After he spoke, the man stood up from the couch. Estella immediately grabbed her father's trouser leg and followed him closely behind. Gazing after the departing father and daughter, Aubrey glared maliciously at the little figure beside Lucian. That little brat again. A moment later, Aubrey redirected her gaze at Lucian. Could you come with me to the hospital then, Lucian? I'm a little scared. Lucian glanced sideways at her with a jeer, but upon considering it, nodded mutely. As she had fallen in his house, it was only polite that Lucian sent her to get treatment. Daddy. Estella tugged on her father's trouser leg, looking all reluctant. Daddy accompanied Miss Jarvis all night at the hospital when he sent her that time. I'm afraid Daddy would do the same for Miss Pearson. Lucian gazed down at his daughter next to him before inclining his head at Aubrey. Wait a moment. Then, he took Estella up the stairs. Don't go to the hospital with her, Daddy. Estella said while puffing up her cheeks as soon as they arrived upstairs. Though he knew what she was hinting at, Lucian was still amused. Why not? Estella leaned closer to her father with the most forlorn look she could muster, and her tone became meeker. I know you're still mad at Miss Jarvis, Daddy, but you'd promise me that you would ask for my blessing if you were to find me a mother. Estella sounded very hurt. Lucian frowned in puzzlement at those words. Initially, he assumed that the child would mention Roxanne again, but he was surprised when she gave a different reason instead. I have to admit that her reason couldn't have come at a better time. Lucian placed his hand firmly atop Estella's head and caressed her soft hair. I'm only sending Miss Pearson to the hospital, he said gently. I'll be back very soon. Estella gazed wide-eyed at her father, still looking skeptical. However, Lucian did not explain further. A moment later, the child relented. Then you'd better hurry back, Daddy, as she chirruped. Otherwise, I'll be scared tonight. Lucian's brows furrowed imperceptibly at those words. I wonder if that woman had taught Essie how to employ such petty tricks. Daddy, Estella urged a moment later when she did not receive an answer from her father. Shaking himself out of his reverie, Lucian nodded resignedly at his daughter. Only then did she let go and watch him go down the stairs. Aubrey was beside herself with anxiousness as she waited downstairs and remained in doubt as she watched Lucian descend the stairs. That little brat's private word with Lucian is obviously trying to get him not to send me to the hospital. Aubrey was aware that Lucian spoiled Estella and was even delaying marrying her because of the girl. I wonder if I would have to go to the hospital alone because of her. Aubrey could not quell her racing heart, even when Lucian stood firmly before her. Lucian turned to address the family doctor. I must trouble you with Miss Pearson, Dr. Elswick. Aubrey's eyes widened at those words when she realized she was correct in her hunch that he did not intend to keep her company. Do you hate me that much, Lucian? Aubrey hung her head with feigned injured and summoned her tears. Lucian grimaced impatiently. I've contacted your parents, and they will pick you up from the hospital soon. I'll keep you company here while we wait." Aubrey glanced up with a frown. It's late. I don't want them to worry." Lucian had already turned and marched toward the entrance. They should be on their way and would be even more worried if they did not see you at the hospital." Gritting her teeth angrily at those words, Aubrey stood up with the doctor's help. Be careful, Miss Pearson. Take your time," Sunny said in concern. Aubrey did not even glance at him. Every step she took was increasingly more forceful, as if trying to fracture her ankle. Sunny watched her and was rather worried, but upon realizing that she would not heed his advice, he promptly fell silent. There was another bout of rejection when it was time to enter the car. In order to prevent any unforeseen circumstances, Sunny was to accompany Aubrey to the hospital. With respect to hierarchy, he was supposed to occupy the front passenger seat while Aubrey and Lucian sat behind. Nevertheless, when he arrived at the car, Lucian was already seated in the front passenger seat. Sunny carefully helped Aubrey into the back seat before gazing at Lucian. "What is this?" "Mr. Farwell, this is..." Lucian returned his gaze through the rearview mirror. Sit down. Miss Pearson wouldn't mind." Sunny then turned his gaze gingerly toward Aubrey, who refrained from gritting her teeth in consternation to smile nonchalantly at Sunny. Please sit. I need you to help me out." Sunny was flattered by those words. That's my job." At last, he climbed nimbly into the car and seated himself beside Aubrey. To avoid annoying Aubrey, he surreptitiously leaned toward the door to place as much distance as possible between them. Fortunately, the journey was smooth, and the car stopped outside the entrance of the hospital soon after. Lucian was the first one to exit the vehicle. Sunny followed closely behind, then turned around and helped Aubrey. Gina and her husband had been waiting for a long time by then and hurriedly came to greet them when they saw Lucian. What happened, Lucian? How did Aubrey hurt herself?" Then, she glanced around and added anxiously, "Where's Aubrey?" As soon as she spoke, she saw her daughter appear with Sunny's help. The couple scowled. Though they knew of Lucian's intention to cancel the wedding, they did not expect him to be that harsh to their daughter. Lucian had already explained over the phone that Aubrey might have a hairline fracture, and despite knowing the severity of her condition, he did not even bother to help her. If somebody had taken a photograph and circulated it, their engagement would have become a joke. The couple's minds raced with the best course of action before resigning to humble themselves. What happened, Aubrey? How did you hurt yourself so badly?" Not seeming to notice Lucian's cold attitude, the couple directed their concerned attention to their daughter and took over Sunny's job in assisting her. Aubrey allowed her emotions to run rampant at the sight of her parents. She scowled, refusing to answer them. Sunny stepped forward to speak out. Miss Pearson had fallen down the stairs, and her ankle is hurt. It's not serious and she is going to be fine with a couple of days in a cast and rest. Gina turned pale at those words. How could you say that a fracture is not serious? Aubrey gave her mother a meaningful gaze at the latter's hostile tone. Upon realizing she had said something wrong, Gina suppressed her anger. The full extent of Aubrey's injury was ascertained after paying a visit to the orthopedic specialist and taking an X-ray. The group watched as Aubrey's foot was put in a cast. Lucian glanced at the time and frowned. Now that you're here, Mr. and Mrs. Pearson, I should get going. At that, he inclined his head at the two elders before turning to Sunny. You will be responsible for following up on Ms. Pearson's progress. Expedite her recovery. Naturally, Sunny promised without hesitation. Lucian. Gina called to stop him as she glanced at her daughter and then at Lucian's departing back. Lucian's stride faltered as he turned around. Is there anything else? Gina gave a dry laugh. Look at how badly injured Aubrey is. Besides, her father and I have been busy of late and may not be able to handle her. Why don't Aubrey stay with you? Before she finished her sentence, Lucian interrupted. I will send somebody to care for her if need be. Gina gulped and turned to face her husband with a furious expression. Samuel knew what his wife was up to and chimed in at once. That's not what we meant. Besides, we won't feel at ease having an outsider care for her." Their words could not be more explicit. They hoped Aubrey would be allowed to stay at the Farwell residence. As Lucian was still courteous enough to give them due respect as elders, Samuel was reasonably confident that Lucian might agree his request. To his surprise, Lucian rejected him casually. In that case, I can send her to my mother's." In an instant, the Pearson family of 3 was dumbstruck. However, Lucian had still shown respect to the 2 elders by providing a reason. "I've been swamped of late. Besides, I need to care for Essie. I have my own obligations to attend to." Upon realizing that their plan had fallen apart, Gina and her husband gritted their teeth and swallowed the indignity. Gina simpered, "There's no need to trouble Mrs. Farwell. I'll take care of Aubrey at home these coming days." Lucian nodded non-committedly. He turned and left after nodding once more at the 2 of them. Lucian's phone rang when he arrived at the hospital entrance. It was the landline from home. "When are you coming back, Daddy?" Estella's demure voice sounded from the other end as soon as he picked up. "I'm on the way," Lucian replied softly. "Go to sleep first, I'll be home to see you soon." Estella promised and hung up quickly after that. It was already late at night when Lucian arrived back at his manor. Then, he made his way to Estella's bedroom as soon as he got home, just like how he had promised her. To his surprise, he found the child still awake. She watched him enter indignantly without saying a word. Lucian frowned. "What are you angry about this time?" "You're back so late," Estella complained. "I would love it if Daddy spent all night with Miss Jarvis, but he was with Miss Pearson. I dislike her." Counting in the travel time, it would not take him more than an hour to make it back. Lucian's brows twitched at the child's complaint. "The child had never complained when I was out all night caring for Roxanne." It was obvious that both women were given very different treatment. "I ran into Mr. Pearson and Ms. Walker," he explained patiently to the child while suppressing his exasperation. Estella's cheeks remained puffed with displeasure. Lucian knew the child would not be deterred from speaking with him about Roxanne, so he did not bother explaining further. Estella was still considering how to talk to her father, but his reply never came. However, she was not going to give up that easily after spending all night mulling over it. Then, Estella steeled herself to begin. I don't want Miss Pearson to be my mommy." Lucian agreed with an indifferent expression. I know. I want Miss Jarvis," she added quickly, staring at her father. Estella's reaction did not surprise Lucian. His brows furrowed, and his gaze at his daughter turned grave. Don't be mad at Miss Jarvis, please, Daddy?" Estella begged forlornly. Lucian fell silent for a long time before standing up from the bed. Daddy." The child reached out to grab his shirt when she thought her father was going to leave. Lucian merely stood on the spot. His gaze fell onto her little hand. Though Estella knew her father had always accommodated her, it seemed to her that he had become really angry this time. Aware of that thought, Estella let go of her grip with an aggrieved expression on her face. "You promised me, Daddy." What's more, he was the one who suggested it. Now Daddy is going back on his word. Lucian's gaze softened at the sight of the child being close to tears. Several seconds later, he leaned over and caressed her head comfortingly. Pursing her lips, Estella avoided his gesture. Helplessness flashed across Lucian's eyes. There are no guarantees when it comes to relationships. I need to think through this." "Well, just think about that woman's attitude toward me." Without giving the child the opportunity to speak, Lucian leaned over, tucked her in, and turned to leave.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.